The whisper reached him like a blade through silk. "They found you, sir." The words barely moved her lips, yet they detonated something ancient behind his eyes. For half a second, the Tycoon remained perfectly still, as if the entire room had frozen around him. Then his hand closed around hers, not gently, not violently, but with startling urgency, and he pulled her into motion before she could even breathe. And in that instant Marina understood. Whatever was coming for him was now coming for her too. They cut through the dining room like a disturbance in water. Chairs scraped. A crystal glass tipped and shattered behind them, the sound sharp and indecent against the hush of wealth and velvet. Marina barely had time to register faces turning, conversations snapping mid-sentence, eyes following their flight with confusion, edged by irritation. Her heartbeat stuttered, tripped over itself, then surged hard against her ribs. His grip never loosened. They moved fast, but not chaotically. He guided her with an instinctive certainty, shoulder cutting through space, body angled to shield without slowing. His pace forced her into a half-run. Her heels slipped once on polished stone. He caught it without looking, fingers tightening, adjusting his stride to hers in a way that felt practiced, as if he had done this before, many times, with many lives at stake. The corridor swallowed them in dim gold light and shadow. The air changed immediately. Gone was the layered perfume of wine and truffle and quiet opulence. Here it smelled of metal, ozone, cold stone. The sounds thinned into echoes. Hurried footsteps, the faint murmur of staff beyond hidden doors, the unsettling absence of music. Marina became acutely aware of the texture of his hand around hers, warm, ungloved, steady despite the velocity, and of the thin film of sweat forming at the base of her neck. She had spoken the words without understanding them. They found you. She didn't know who they were. She only knew what she'd seen moments before. The subtle shift near the entrance, the way two men had entered without drawing attention, how the temperature of the room had dropped around them like pressure, the way the host's smile had trembled, the way she herself had been suddenly, inexplicably terrified, and then she had moved. They burst through the service doors and into the back corridors where luxury stripped down to function. Stainless steel, white tile, harsh lighting. Someone shouted. Another voice cursed in a language she didn't recognize. The Tycoon cut left without hesitation, then right, then through another door. Marina's lungs burned. Her mind lagged behind her body, desperately trying to catch up with what she had just become a part of. She was trembling now, not visibly, not enough for him to slow, but inside, violently. Fear had a way of lighting her from the inside, throwing her nerves into stark relief. Every sound felt closer. Every shadow felt occupied. Her instincts screamed questions she did not have time to ask. Why him? Why now? Why me? A final corridor opened ahead, narrower, darker. At the far end, a metal staircase spiraled down into unseen depth. He took it 2 steps at a time, still pulling her, gravity yanking at her balance. The world condensed into breath and motion, and the thunder of blood in her ears. Somewhere above, an alarm began to scream. Not loud yet, but rising. At the bottom, he pushed through a heavy door and slammed it behind them. Silence fell like impact. The space was small and raw. A storage room or forgotten cellar, its concrete walls sweating faint moisture. A single bulb flickered overhead. The air was cold enough to catch in Marina's throat. She bent forward, hands on her knees, fighting to draw in enough breath to steady herself. Only then did he release her hand. The absence of his grip felt like losing gravity. He turned finally, and looked at her properly. Up close, the Tycoon did not look cinematic. No towering posture, no theatrical stillness. He looked human in that moment, breath moving fast in his chest, jaw clenched, eyes sharp with calculation, and something darker beneath it. Not panic, not exactly. A kind of alert patience that suggested he had long learned the shape of danger. "You shouldn't have come to me," he said quietly. His voice was low, unaccented, controlled even now. It held no anger, only fact. Marina straightened slowly. Her legs trembled, traitorous things. She made herself lift her chin. The light caught the faint sheen of sweat on her temple, the small scar above her left brow she'd earned as a child. She realized she was still wearing her work uniform. Black fabric, pressed lines, a faint smudge of wine near the cuff she hadn't yet had time to hide. "I didn't come," she answered. "I warned you." His gaze sharpened. "That makes it worse," he said. The weight of that sentence settled between them. Somewhere above, the alarm cut off abruptly. The silence that followed felt deliberate, intentional. Marina swallowed. The room seemed to shrink around her. In the absence of motion, fear found space to stretch. It slid into her thoughts like smoke, blurring the edges of everything. She had only meant to survive another shift. That had been the plan. Blend in, disappear in precision and silence, serve what was asked, absorb the small humiliations like she always did. The sideways looks, the clipped tone, the way her existence was acknowledged and dismissed in the same glance. She was very good at being invisible when it mattered. Tonight, invisibility had failed her. She had noticed the men because she always noticed danger, because she had learned long ago what it felt like when a room shifted against you, because survival had trained her senses before education ever did, and because somehow the Tycoon had become visible to her in a way he was not to others. "You ran," she said faintly. "I always do," he replied. "When I must." The words unsettled her more than reassurance would have. He glanced toward the ceiling as if listening for movement through layers of stone. His fingers flexed once, twice. The urgency had not left his body. It simply waited. Marina wrapped her arms around herself, more reflex than choice. Cold seeped into her palms. She realized she had not been afraid for herself at first. The fear had come from him, from the invisible weight that followed him like a shadow, cast by something far larger. "You're bleeding," she said suddenly. He looked down. A thin line of red traced along the back of his hand, where it must have clipped metal in their descent. It wasn't deep. He hadn't noticed. "It's nothing," he said. "Nothing is just another word for unattended," she answered softly. He studied her at that, as if recalibrating. The tension in the room shifted by a fraction, from pursuit to assessment. "You're not like the others here," he said. She almost laughed. "No one here is like me." Outside the door, footsteps passed. One set, then another. Voices murmured too softly to parse. Marina's muscles tensed involuntarily. Every instinct she had urged her to shrink smaller, to become a shadow again. But she didn't move, because he was still between her and the door. "You have no idea what you stepped into," he said. She met his gaze. "I rarely do. That never stops it from happening." For a brief moment, something like recognition passed through his eyes. Not familiarity, parity. A shared acknowledgement of fate's poor sense of boundaries. The footsteps retreated, but the danger did not. The bulb overhead flickered again, more violently this time. Shadows surged up the walls and fell away. Marina's breath slowed, only now realizing how close to collapse she'd come. Adrenaline left a sour metallic taste in her mouth. She had the distinct sense that what had just happened was not an escape, only a postponement. "What happens now?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved closer, not abruptly, not threateningly, until the cold smelled less sharp between them. He lowered his voice, though no one could hear. "Now," he said, "they decide whether you are leverage or collateral." The word struck her like a blow. Collateral. She thought of her mother's hands when she used to pray over her at night, of the cheap apartment with the leaking ceiling, of the long road she had run just to end up carrying plates through rooms that punished her for daring to occupy space. She thought of how easily lives folded when pressure was applied at the right angle. "I didn't agree to be either," she said. His mouth shifted in something that might have been a smile, might have been a fracture. "Agreement is a luxury." Distant voices returned, closer now. The cadence felt purposeful. Searching. He stepped back, already recalculating. His eyes moved across the room, measuring exits, weaknesses, options that did not include safety, only impact. Marina watched him with a strange, rising clarity. This man was not running from scandal, not from law, not from reputation. He was running from something far older and far more personal. The storage door rattled once, a testing knock. He turned to her, and for the first time since she had spoken the words that changed their night, doubt touched his face. "Stay behind me," he said. She didn't answer, because at that exact moment the lights cut out completely, and in the sudden, absolute darkness, the lock on the door began to turn. Darkness slammed into the room like a held breath finally released. The bulb's ghost still burned in Marina's vision, a trembling afterimage that made the shadows seem to move. The lock turned with slow, deliberate patience, metal whispering against metal. She reached for the wall behind her with one hand, grounding herself in cold concrete. The Tycoon shifted in front of her, a silent barrier, his breathing steady enough to feel intentional. The door opened only a fraction at first. Light spilled in as a thin blade slicing across the floor, stopping at the edge of his shoe. A voice spoke from the corridor, calm and almost courteous, asking for confirmation of the room's contents. Marina recognized none of the accent, yet something in its rhythm made her stomach tighten. The Tycoon answered nothing. Silence stretched, heavy enough to feel like weight on the chest. A second voice murmured closer, lower, impatient. The door creaked wider. Two silhouettes emerged against the corridor's pale glow, their bodies still indistinct but their intent unmistakable. Marina's pulse hammered in her ears. She realized, distantly, that if they rushed the room now, she would have nowhere to go. No cover, no exit. Only the man standing between her and whatever waited beyond the light. The left silhouette leaned forward, trying to peer inside. The Tycoon moved first. His hand came up in a sudden, precise arc, knocking the door hard against the frame. The clang echoed like a gunshot in the confined space. At the same instant, he lunged sideways, dragging Marina with him. She stumbled, almost fell, but stayed upright by instinct alone. Footsteps erupted outside as shouts broke the fragile quiet. They ran again, not toward the stair they had come down, but deeper into the underbelly of the building. The darkness peeled back in patches as emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the corridors in pulsing red. Marina's field of vision narrowed to movement and sound, and the relentless pull of his hand. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, yet she did not slow. Panic sharpened her into something else. Faster, quieter, almost feral. They burst through another door and into a service elevator bay. The Tycoon slapped the call button twice in rapid succession, not waiting for the soft chime of reassurance. Somewhere behind them, metal clattered, voices surged closer. The elevator arrived with agonizing slowness. Marina felt the vibration through the soles of her shoes, a heartbeat before the doors slid open. He pushed her inside, then stepped in after, spinning to face the closing gap. Hands slammed against the doors just as they met. For an instant, Marina saw a face through the narrowing slit, eyes bright with determination, not anger. The doors sealed with a final hiss. The elevator began its descent with a low mechanical groan. Only then did the Tycoon's shoulders drop a fraction, the tension loosening just enough to allow breath to escape him in one controlled exhale. Neither of them spoke at first. The red emergency light washed their faces in restless shadow, making his features look carved and unfamiliar. Marina's reflection in the metal wall startled her. Wide eyes, colorless lips, hair escaping its neat confinement. The space felt too small now that they were not moving. The adrenaline had nowhere to go. Her hands trembled openly, no longer held in check by motion. "They won't stop," she said at last, hearing the steadiness in her own voice with faint surprise. He didn't deny it. "No," he said. "They rarely do." The elevator shuddered as it reached the bottom floor. The door slid open to reveal a narrow underground passage, dimly lit and lined with exposed pipes. The air smelled of damp stone and oil. He stepped out first, scanning left, then right. When he motioned for her to follow, she obeyed without hesitation. Trust had formed between them without ceremony, forged by the simple fact of shared danger. They moved quickly, but not recklessly. At the far end of the passage, a heavy steel door loomed, marked with faded warning paint. The Tycoon keyed in a code with swift precision. Marina watched his hands, noting the lack of hesitation, the muscle memory. The door swung inward, revealing a cramped maintenance tunnel sloping downward again. The sense of being swallowed by the building grew stronger. Once inside, the door sealed behind them with a hydraulic sigh. The sound felt final, irrevocable. Marina leaned against the wall, fighting dizziness. Her legs felt distant, as if the floor were tilting. He watched her closely now, concern cutting through calculation. "Sit," he said. She slid down until she was seated on cold concrete, her back against rough stone, breath coming in uneven pulls. For the first time since the chase began, there was no immediate sound of pursuit. Only the low hum of systems running somewhere beyond the walls and the whisper of their own breathing in the confined space. Marina closed her eyes briefly, letting the darkness press against her eyelids. When she opened them again, he was crouched in front of her, studying her face as if committing it to memory. "You didn't freeze," he said quietly. "Most people do." "I didn't have the luxury," she replied. A corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile. "That's true." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been circling her thoughts like a trapped bird. "Who are they?" He looked past her for a moment, as if seeing something far removed from the tunnel's narrow walls. "People who believed I owed them more than money," he said at last. "People I once trusted." The answer settled heavily between them. Marina absorbed it in silence, hearing the unspoken layers beneath the words: betrayal, history, consequence. "And now they want me," she said. "No," he corrected gently. "Now they want to use you." The distinction did not comfort her. Still, she felt a strange clarity take hold. Her life had always been shaped by forces larger than her name, larger than her choices. Poverty, position, the quiet assumptions people made when they looked at her. This, too, was a force she could not control, only respond to. The tunnel sloped into a wider chamber that opened unexpectedly into a subterranean garage. A handful of cars stood in shadow, sleek silhouettes resting like restrained predators. Soft lights glowed along the walls, illuminating polished concrete and yellow safety lines. The Tycoon headed straight for a matte black sedan near the far corner. He unlocked it with a subtle flick of his wrist without slowing. "Get in," he said. Marina hesitated only a second before moving. The interior of the car was warm, smelling faintly of leather, and something she could not identify. Clean, expensive, intimate. The door closed behind her with a dull ceiling thud that cut off the echoing emptiness of the garage. He took the driver's seat and started the engine without flourish. The purr of power felt alive beneath them. As they rolled toward the exit ramp, Marina became aware of another vehicle's lights igniting at the opposite end of the garage. A second engine joined their own, then a third. The pursuit had become clearly visible now. The Tycoon accelerated, guiding the sedan toward the narrow ramp that spiraled upward like a concrete throat. The pursuing lights surged closer, shapes resolving into vehicles built for speed. The chase that followed unfolded in a blur of wet asphalt, streetlight flashes, and relentless acceleration. Marina braced herself against the door, heart climbing into her throat as the car swung through tight turns and shot across intersections on red. The city at night became a flickering tunnel of glass and neon. Sirens wailed distantly but did not approach. This was a race occurring just outside the boundaries of public notice. At one violent turn, the sedan fishtailed. Marina cried out involuntarily, fingers digging into the leather as the world seemed to pivot sideways. He recovered flawlessly, steering into the skid with calm precision that felt unreal. The pursuing cars fell back for a moment, then surged again. The rhythm of pursuit took on a brutal cadence. Gain, fall back, gain again. "You should never have been here," he said tightly, eyes never leaving the road. "And yet I am," she answered, surprising herself with how steady it sounded. The road narrowed into a corridor of shipping warehouses and darkened storefronts. He cut the lights suddenly, plunging them into darkness at highway speed. Marina's breath hitched. Ahead, the street dissolved into black silhouette. At the last second, he veered sharply into an open loading bay and slammed the brakes. The car slid to a stop in shadow as the pursuing vehicles roared past the entrance seconds later. Silence returned in a rush that rang in the ears. For a long moment, neither moved. The aftershock of speed trembled through Marina's limbs. Her pulse felt visible beneath her skin. Gradually, the sound of engines faded into distance. The Tycoon exhaled slowly, then turned his head to look at her. In the dimness, his eyes held a new expression, something like reluctant admiration mixed with concern. "This is where I tell you to disappear," he said, "and where you'll tell me you can't." She met his gaze in the darkness. "No," she said, "this is where you tell me the truth, and where I decide what I do with it." A faint, incredulous sound escaped him. Not quite a laugh. "You're far more dangerous than they are," he murmured. Marina looked toward the windshield, at the thin band of light where the loading bay met the street. "I've always been dangerous to other people's plans," she said softly. He studied her in silence. Somewhere above them, a distant engine backfired. The city resumed its indifferent rhythm. In the privacy of the shadowed bay, an unspoken shift settled between them, subtle but undeniable. And then his phone vibrated on the console between them. The screen lit with a single message that made his face tighten instantly. "They know about her." The phone's pale glow faded, but the message stayed carved into the air between them. "They know about her." Marina felt it land not as fear, but as a cold rearranging of reality. The Tycoon didn't speak. His jaw tightened once, a subtle shift, the kind that signaled doors closing inside a person. Outside, somewhere beyond the loading bay, tires whispered along wet asphalt like nothing in the world had changed. "You didn't even know my name," she said quietly. "I knew enough," he replied, eyes still on the dark street ahead. The answer didn't satisfy her. It only deepened the unease. Marina watched her breath fog faintly on the glass, and then vanish. For the first time since the chase began, she felt truly seen, not as a body in motion, not as an accident of circumstance, but as something deliberate, something now written into someone else's strategy. Her pulse steadied into something harder than fear. "They know where I live," she said. "Yes." "They know my mother." "Yes." The calm with which he admitted it was more unsettling than denial. Marina swallowed, the taste of iron rising again. She thought of the narrow apartment, the cracked tiles, the way her mother left the light on at night even when no one was expected. She imagined unfamiliar footsteps climbing that stair. The image rooted itself painfully behind her eyes. "Then we're not hiding," she said. "We're running circles." His fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "We're buying time." "For what?" He finally looked at her. In the dimness, his eyes were no longer merely alert. They were burdened. "For a choice I should have made years ago." The warehouse bay suddenly felt too small for the weight of that confession. He restarted the engine without further explanation and eased the car back into the street. This time, he drove without speed, merging into traffic as if they were any other two figures swallowed by the city's pulse. Marina watched storefronts drift by, closed cafes, flickering signs, silhouettes of strangers paused in doorways. Ordinary life within a breath of something that hunted. "You said they want to use me," she said. "How?" "They believe your leverage," he answered. "And now they believe your proof." "Proof of what?" He hesitated, a rare fracture in his composure. "That I still have something left to lose." The idea struck her with unexpected force. She turned fully toward him, studying the angle of his profile, the lines drawn there by years of intercepting pressure before it reached his core. "I don't belong to you," she said. "No," he agreed. "That's exactly why you're dangerous to them." Rain began without warning, a sudden sheen across the road that caught the city lights and bent them into trembling color. He guided the car through it with effortless control. Marina pressed her fingertips to the window, feeling the vibration of motion, grounding herself. Her mind raced ahead of her emotions now, threading implications together with growing speed. "You didn't choose me," she said. "You reacted to me." He nodded. "And they adjusted." "That means they already knew how I move," she said slowly. "What I see. How I notice." His glance flicked to her, sharp. "You're observant." "It's how I've stayed alive," she replied. They drove in silence for a stretch, the rain intensifying until the world beyond the windshield blurred into streaked abstraction. Marina realized they were no longer moving toward the heart of the city, but away from it, descending into lower neighborhoods where the sky felt closer and the buildings leaned as if in quiet conspiracy. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To someone who owes me nothing," he said. "And knows everything." The answer did not calm her. They arrived at the edge of an old industrial district where warehouses gave way to forgotten docks and rusted fencing. The sedan disappeared beneath a canopy of shadow as he turned into a narrow access road, barely wide enough for one car. At its end stood a building that had stopped pretending to be anything decades ago. Brick exposed, windows black, the faint glow of a single security lamp trembling above a metal door. He killed the engine. For a moment, neither moved. The rain drummed softly on the roof, steady as a pulse. Marina felt the pressure of what waited on the other side of that door, though she had no name for it yet. Only wait. This is not refuge, he said. It's reckoning. She pushed the door open anyway. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and machine oil. The space beyond the entry opened into a wide, low-lit room, filled with screens, cables, tables strewn with maps and devices Marina could not identify. And at the center of it all, seated calmly as if waiting on a late-night guest, was an older woman with silver hair pulled tight and eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Marina first. "So this is her," the woman said. Marina felt simultaneously exposed and evaluated. "This is me," she replied. The woman's mouth curved with restrained approval. "Good," she said. "You look exactly like the girl they stopped seeing years ago." The Tycoon shut the door behind them. The sound echoed with quiet finality. "They've mobilized," the woman continued, turning back to him. "Not just the men you saw. Infrastructure, money, channels you thought buried. I expected as much," he said. "That's optimistic," she replied dryly. "They're also accelerating the Caracas ledger." Marina felt a subtle shift in the room at the sound of that word. Ledger. Not from fear exactly, but from recognition. Something in her memory stirred. Faint but stubborn. "Caracas," she repeated. "That's not just a city. It's a dead end." The older woman's gaze snapped to her with sudden precision. "Tell me what you mean." Marina hesitated, then spoke from instinct rather than certainty. "My father disappeared trying to recover something there. He said it was a book that didn't behave like a book, that people killed over it without knowing why." The room fell silent. The Tycoon turned slowly toward her. "What was your father's name?" "Elias Moreno." The woman let out a breath she had not intended to give away. "Then this just became personal," she said quietly. Marina felt the shape of her life tilt abruptly, all its small humiliations and narrow corridors suddenly rearranging into something much larger. The reason her past had always felt unfinished moved now, like a long shadow shifting into focus. "They don't just know about her," the woman continued. "They hunted her once already." Marina's hands went cold. "I was 9, she whispered. "Men asked questions, then they left. They left because your father traded himself for your silence," the woman said. And now the ledger moved again. The Tycoon's jaw tightened anew. "So this was never random. Nothing valuable ever is," the woman replied. Marina felt a strange stillness wash through her, a clarity that was almost peaceful in its cruelty. The danger she had learned to recognize in rooms, in glances, in the air itself. It had not been imagined. It had been inherited. "So now what?" Marina asked. The woman studied her, calculating not her worth, but her endurance. "Now," she said, "we decide whether you run from your name or weaponize it." The Tycoon watched Marina carefully, as if seeing the moment she might fracture. Instead, something else happened. Her spine straightened. Her fear settled into something usable. Outside, far beyond the docks, a distant flare of light bloomed briefly against the clouds, and every screen in the room flickered at once. The screen stabilized in uneven waves of light, each one resolving into fragments of footage, financial tables, satellite images, and scrolling lines of encrypted data. The room felt suddenly awake, as if a dormant organism had opened its eyes. Marina stood still, absorbing patterns she did not yet understand. The Tycoon moved closer to one screen, his silhouette cutting across shifting graphs that looked disturbingly alive. The older woman, Ada, the Tycoon called her quietly, touched the surface of a tablet and the images shifted again. A blurred aerial photograph of a coastal compound filled the largest display. "They moved the ledger," she said. "Not digitally, physically. That's rare. It means they're afraid of it being touched by people like us." Marina leaned forward despite herself. "A book can make powerful people afraid?" she asked. Ada's gaze softened briefly. "Not a book. A map of guilt. Names, transactions, disappearances disguised as logistics. Proof arranged in a way that doesn't decay with time." She glanced at Marina. "Your father helped build its structure before he tried to erase it from circulation." The words folded past into present with startling speed. Marina felt the echo of old memories stir. Her father's distracted silences, the way he'd listened to radio static at night, as if waiting for something to speak back. He told me once that truth doesn't like being stored, she murmured. That it moves like water when it's pressured. The Tycoon turned his head slightly. He was right, he said. They thought Caracas buried it. Instead, it incubated. Ada shifted another feed onto the screens. Security footage of a shipping container being unloaded beneath floodlights. Men moved with hurried precision. 3 hours ago, she said. The ledger surfaced again through a proxy syndicate that thinks it bought treasure. They don't yet realize what they're carrying. And now everyone else does, Marina said. Not everyone, Ada replied. Only those who can read the movement of fear. The Tycoon exhaled slowly. Which puts us on a shrinking list. Marina felt the truth of that settle like gravity. She thought of her childhood apartment again, of her mother's careful rituals of safety that had never quite lifted. They hunted me once, she said. Why leave me alive? Because your father made himself inconvenient, Ada answered. He set traps with time delays. This ledger has killed people years after they thought themselves safe. The Tycoon's phone vibrated again, sharp and intrusive in the quiet room. He glanced at the screen briefly, then turned it face down without speaking. Marina noticed the rigid set of his shoulders. Bad news travels faster than fear, she said. Fear always arrives first, he replied. We just don't notice until it speaks. Ada brought up another feed, this one resolving into a still image of Marina outside Le Bernardin earlier that night. The surveillance angle captured her profile in unguarded clarity, the moment before she'd whispered the warning. Marina felt a jolt of recognition and violation. They were already watching me, she said. Yes, Ada confirmed. They wanted to see which direction you'd move in when the pressure arrived. The Tycoon's jaw tightened. Then this wasn't pursuit, he said. It was provocation. Ada nodded. They needed to flush you out together. Marina took a step back, the room feeling suddenly smaller. Together for what? For confirmation, Ada said. That his instincts haven't dulled, and that yours were inherited. Silence pulsed between them with quiet intensity. Marina thought of the message on the phone. They know about her. It hadn't been discovery. It had been validation. A cold wave of anger rose beneath her fear. Controlled, but potent. Then they'll get more confirmation than they asked for, she said. The Tycoon looked at her sharply, not with surprise, but with something like recognition. You understand leverage faster than most people, he said. I grew up without any, she replied. Ada tapped her tablet again, bringing up a moving map of shipping routes across oceans, lines of light arcing across dark blue. The container is scheduled to cross 2 borders within the next 12 hours, she said. Once it does, the ledger becomes myth again. Untouchable. We have one window. To intercept? The Tycoon asked. To choose, Ada said. Intercepting means detonating half the network at once, or losing everything that's kept them restrained. Marina felt a strange heat bloom behind her ribs. What's restrained about them now? Only their uncertainty, Ada replied. And their belief that some ghosts should remain buried. The Tycoon paced slowly, controlled energy coiling behind every movement. If we move publicly, they'll scatter and regenerate, he said. If we move quietly, the ledger vanishes into shadow again. Ada looked at him. And if you move through her? The room stilled. Marina felt their attention shift fully onto her. Not as a shield this time, not as collateral, but as a variable they had not yet solved. Through me how? She asked. Ada studied her with a gaze that was neither cruel nor kind. Your father encoded part of the ledger's verification through biometric patterns you share. Genetic sequences aren't only bodies, they're signatures. Your presence alone destabilizes its encryption. Marina's breath caught. You're saying my existence unlocks it? I'm saying your blood finishes what he started, Ada answered. The weight of that truth pressed into Marina's chest. Her father's disappearance rearranged itself with new logic. Not abandonment, not accident. A trade stretched across decades. Then they didn't spare me once, she said quietly. They suspended me. The Tycoon's voice softened unexpectedly. And fate finally cashed the debt. Marina looked at him. You knew, didn't you? Before tonight. He did not evade the truth. I suspected. I was hoping to be wrong. That hope nearly got me killed, she said flatly. Yes, he said. It did. They held each other's gaze without blinking. For a moment, the power between them hung in a volatile balance, her anger poised against his restraint. Then Ada's voice cut gently between them. "We don't have the luxury of absolution right now," she said. "Only choice." Marina turned to the map again, the glowing roots pulsing like veins across the sea. "Then tell me what happens if I say no." Ada met her eyes. "Then this ledger sinks back into darkness, their trade continues. The disappearances stay organized. And eventually, they come for you again without warning." "And if I say yes?" "Their world fractures," Ada replied. "Not cleanly, not without collateral damage, but permanently." The word collateral echoed in Marina's thoughts with bitter symmetry. She folded her arms, steadying herself. "And me?" Ada hesitated. "You become visible in ways you can never undo," the Tycoon added quietly, "and invisible in ways no one can protect." Marina felt the decision forming beneath her fear, not as bravado, not as sacrifice, but as alignment. Everything in her life had trained her for constrained choices. This one felt vast by comparison. "Where is the container right now?" she asked. Ada highlighted a point on the map, blinking near a narrow strait, moving faster than it should. "Someone important wants it off land before morning." "Then we meet it before dawn," Marina said. The Tycoon studied her face closely, searching for hesitation. He found none. "Once you step into that line," he said quietly, "there is no return to anonymity." Marina thought of Le Bernardin's polished floors, of the way invisibility had once felt like survival. "Anonymity has always been borrowed," she said, "not owned." Ada allowed herself the faintest smile. "Your father would have liked you," she said. Marina surprised herself by answering, "I think he already did." Suddenly, the entire wall of screens flared brighter with synchronized urgency, alerts cascading in rapid succession. Coordinates updated. Timers appeared. The room filled with the electric sound of an unfolding operation. Ada looked once more at Marina. "They've rerouted the transport," she said calmly. "They know we're awake." The Tycoon turned toward the exit. "Then we stop running," he said. Marina followed without waiting for instruction, her pulse steady and forward-facing. Fear had become momentum now, and somewhere out in the dark, the ledger moved closer to the surface. The night air near the docks cut colder than Marina expected, sharp with salt and diesel. The city thinned here into shadow and distance. The sound stretched and hollow. Cranes loomed like skeletal sentinels against the clouded sky, their lights blinking in slow, patient rhythms. The Tycoon's footsteps never faltered as they moved between stacked containers, his pace not rushed, not slow, calculated. Marina matched it, aware that this place carried echoes of things that never made the news. They reached a vantage point where the strait opened wide, black water reflecting slivers of industrial light. A massive cargo ship rested in near silence beyond the security perimeter, its bulk more presence than form. Ada's voice came through a discreet earpiece in Marina's ear, calm and precise. Container shifted sectors again, their masking movement through auxiliary channels. "You have less than 40 minutes before it disappears into layered jurisdiction." Marina felt time compress around that number. 40 minutes to rewrite decades of deliberate darkness. The Tycoon handed her a slim device no larger than a deck of cards. Its surface vibrated faintly, alive under her palm. "This will establish proximity authentication," he said. "If your blood is the key, this will wake whatever your father buried inside the code." "And if it doesn't?" she asked. "Then we improvise," he said without irony. They moved along the outer fencing until a narrow service gate appeared, its lock already blinking red-green as Ada worked it remotely. The gate eased open with a soft mechanical surrender. Inside, floodlights carved the dock into harsh contrasts. Workers moved with choreographed efficiency, unaware of the fracture approaching their routine. Marina felt strangely detached, as though the world had receded to a thin membrane beyond her skin. The container appeared at the far end, freshly relocated, marked only with neutral logistics codes. 2 men stood near it, their posture too relaxed to be legitimate labor. The Tycoon slowed, assessing angles, distances, the unseen pressures behind every visible movement. "When I draw their attention," he said quietly, "you go straight to the scanner port on the container's side. Don't hesitate." Marina nodded. Fear passed through her like current, but did not stop her. She waited for the shift, the precise instant when motion would become inevitability. It came as the Tycoon stepped into the open. Distraction detonated quickly, shouted commands, sudden turns of heads, the unmistakable jolt of recognition. Marina broke from shadow in the same breath, moving with a speed she did not know she possessed. The world narrowed to the dull gray of metal before her, the small, recessed panel on the container wall. She pressed the device forward as a gunshot cracked behind her. The device flared hot in her hand. Light surged across its surface in erratic lines that resolved into ordered geometry. The container shuddered faintly, as if something inside it had shifted its weight. Marina's breath caught. On her earpiece, Ada's voice sharpened. "It's responding. Your biometric pattern is fragmenting the encryption lattice. You're opening a door that didn't think it still had hinges." Another gunshot rang out, closer now. The Tycoon's movement drew fire away from her in sharp, efficient arcs. He moved not like someone avoiding death, but like someone negotiating with it. Precise, unflinching. Marina kept the device pressed to the steel, heart hammering in violent rhythm. The container trembled again. She felt a sudden deep vibration travel through her arm and up into her chest, as if her own pulse had briefly synchronized with something larger. "Marina," Ada said urgently, "I need you to breathe steadily. Erratic patterns will slow the authentication." Marina forced herself to inhale, exhale. The fire around her became distant thunder. Inside the device, a tone rose. Thin at first, then fuller, steadier. Lines of light reconfigured. The container released a low, resonant sound that felt disturbingly like acknowledgement. For a fleeting moment, Marina saw her father's face as he'd looked the last morning she'd seen him. Unshaven, eyes tired but resolved. The memory steadied her hands. The container's side panel unlocked with a heavy metallic clunk. The men guarding it realized too late what was happening. One moved toward her, but the Tycoon intercepted him with abrupt finality. Marina pulled the panel open and stared into darkness disturbed by a single internal light. Within, a sealed black case sat embedded in shock mounts, unmarked, unadorned. The device in her hand pulsed insistently near it. "This is it?" Ada whispered. "The ledger core." Marina reached inside. Her fingertips brushed the case and the world seemed to tilt. Data surged across nearby monitors Ada had tapped into remotely. Streams of hidden transaction pathways. Names linked to movements, movements to disappearances. The scale of it did not feel infinite, but vast enough to alter the architecture of power itself. Marina staggered slightly under the invisible weight of it. Footsteps pounded closer. "Extraction window collapsing," Ada warned. "You have seconds, not minutes." Marina braced and wrenched the case free. It was heavier than it looked, dense with purpose. As she turned, a figure emerged from behind the container's far edge. One of the original pursuers, eyes cold with intent, sharpened to necessity. His weapon was already raised. The Tycoon moved faster than thought. He crossed the space between them in 3 relentless strides, colliding with the man before the shot could be perfectly aligned. The weapon discharged harmlessly into air as they struck the ground together. Marina did not stop. She ran, the case tight against her ribs, every nerve screaming motion. Distance, survival. Sirens rose in the distance. Too many, converging too fast. Ada's voice steadied her through the chaos. "The system is already cascading. They're scrambling to bury what's tearing open. Whatever happens now, the ledger will not go quietly again." Marina reached the perimeter fencing where the gate yawned open, lights flickering erratically. She pushed through without hesitation. Behind her, the sounds of struggle resolved abruptly, then ceased. For one terrible second, she feared to turn back. The Tycoon appeared moments later, breath sharp but posture intact. They moved together now without words, the docks behind them dissolving into sirens and urgency. A waiting vehicle emerged from shadow at Ada's direction, doors already open. They slid inside as the first waves of official response breached the inner yard. The engine roared to life and they vanished back into the city's indifferent sprawl. Only then did Marina realize her hands were shaking. The case rested between her and the Tycoon, silent now, as if entire worlds had folded themselves into stillness. She stared at it with a strange mixture of reverence and dread. "My father died for this," she said quietly. "Yes," the Tycoon replied. "And for you." That distinction altered the shape of the truth. Marina looked at him, searching for calculation, for manipulation. She found neither in that moment. Only consequence. The car sped onward through corridors of light and shadow, taking them towards something that no longer allowed the comfort of distance. On Ada's screens far away, networks unraveled in real time. Names surfaced where absence had lived. And for the first time in her life, Marina felt her inheritance cease to be a ghost and become a living weight she could not set down. The car threaded through industrial backstreets where sodium lights trembled on wet asphalt and shadows stacked like unfinished thoughts. Marina held the ledger case against her ribs, feeling its cold density through her jacket. With each turn, the city seemed to rearrange itself, folding into narrower corridors and quieter distances. The Tycoon drove without speaking, one hand steady on the wheel. The silence between them was no longer fear-filled, but heavy with consequences. Ada's voice returned through the earpiece after several minutes of static. "They're bleeding now," she said. "Secondary shells collapsing. Tertiary networks exposed. It won't stop the core figures, but it will force them into visibility." Marina closed her eyes briefly at the word bleeding, imagining invisible systems hemorrhaging truth into places that had never allowed it. The Tycoon's jaw tightened slightly, not with triumph, but with grim recognition. The car entered a dim underground ramp beneath an abandoned municipal building. Concrete pillars passed in slow rhythm as they descended into a parking level that smelled faintly of rust and old water. He guided the vehicle into a narrow slot between two support columns and cut the engine. For a moment, nothing moved except dust settling in the headlights. Marina became aware of her breathing again, shallow and quick. He turned toward her slowly. "From this point forward," he said, "every step becomes irreversible." His voice was calm, but something in it had shed the illusion of escape. Marina nodded without dramatics. She had crossed that threshold when her blood met the ledger's lock. There was no ceremony left in acknowledgement, only alignment with what had already happened. They exited the car and moved into a service corridor lit by emergency strips embedded low along the walls. Their footsteps echoed in disciplined rhythm. Ada guided them remotely toward a freight elevator that rattled as it ascended, protesting each level like an old witness resisting testimony. Marina studied the Tycoon's profile in the harsh light and saw the fatigue now threaded beneath control. The upper floor opened into a vast abandoned office wing where glass partitions stood shattered and desks lay entombed in dust. The city's distant glow filtered weakly through high windows streaked with grime. Ada's systems had already awakened part of the building. Dim overhead panels blinked sporadically as they crossed the open floor toward a sealed conference suite at the far end. Inside, the room had been reconfigured into a command space layered with portable servers, projection fields, and hard cables running like exposed veins. The case was set gently at the center of the long table, as if it were something fragile, not dangerous. Marina felt a strange reluctance leave her arms when she released it. The Tycoon did not sit. He remained standing as if still prepared to move. Ada's voice shifted to a larger speaker, filling the room with calm authority. "We have confirmation from 3 independent data shadows," she said. "The ledger is authentic. More than that, it never stopped growing. Elias designed it to absorb patterns automatically when exposed to certain transaction architectures." Marina's father appeared suddenly not as a fugitive but as an architect of delayed reckoning. Marina leaned against the table, absorbing that idea. "Then it was never meant to be hidden forever," she said. "No," Ada replied. "It was meant to outlive erasure." The Tycoon crossed his arms slowly. "Who's closest to the core exposure point right now? Interpol splinter units are circling. 2 independent journalist syndicates caught secondary leaks. And 3 governments just realized they're holding parts of someone else's secret treasury," Ada answered. "The real danger isn't pursuit anymore. It's misinterpretation." Marina felt that settle with quiet dread. "People get careless when they think evil is finished," she said. "Yes," Ada confirmed, "and reckless when they think it belongs to them." The room vibrated faintly as the building's generators shifted load. Screens unfolded along the walls in layered sweeps of light. Faces began appearing in partial transparency. Men and women Marina did not recognize, eyes shielded by power and history. Names scrolled beneath them in languages she could not read. Each face represented currents that had shaped her life without her knowing. Her father's face appeared among them for a brief moment, younger, caught in grainy footage from years before. Marina's breath faltered. The Tycoon watched her with careful attention, but did not interrupt the private collision of memory and revelation. Ada's voice softened slightly. He built anchors into the ledger, she said. People he trusted enough to balance the truth inside it. Marina straightened slowly. And which one of them betrayed him? Ada paused. All of them, she said. Just at different times, and for different prices. The truth landed without spectacle. Marina felt grief, but it came cleanly, without theatrical rupture. It felt like the closing of a lifelong suspense she had never known she was living. So the ledger isn't just evidence, she said. It's a map of weakness. Yes, Ada replied. And a test of endurance. The Tycoon turned toward Marina with measured gravity. If this goes public without control, he said, it destabilizes markets, governments, and families who never touched the crime itself. The shockwaves will not discriminate. Marina understood immediately. Justice imposed without architecture often collapses into chaos. The ledger could burn the innocent along with the guilty. So we regulate the truth, she said quietly. Ada's approval was immediate. Your father reached that conclusion too. He called it framed release. And you waited for me to finish it? Marina said. Yes, Ada answered. Even when waiting became inconvenient. The words inconvenient and waiting rang strangely against the speed of death she had felt earlier at the docks. Marina took a steady breath. Then show me how my part works beyond being a fingerprint. Ada didn't hesitate. Schematics shifted on the screens, resolving into layered nodes built around biometric sequences. Marina saw patterns that looked eerily like vascular systems. Your genetic profile integrates as a fail-deadly check, Ada explained. Only your presence allows manual authorization. If they seize the ledger without you, it corrupts its highest verification layers permanently. Marina absorbed the implication with quiet equilibrium. Then even now, it's safer with me than without. Yes, Ada confirmed. And infinitely more dangerous. Movement erupted in several screens simultaneously, as live footage replaced projections. Armed units were deploying across multiple city vectors. Drones traced coordinates through fogged skylines. The Tycoon exhaled slowly. They're accelerating public reclamation, he said. That means they're trying to wrest control of narrative first. And narrative is always the real battleground, Marina said. A new feed expanded at the room's far wall, an emergency press conference forming in real time. Government insignias layered behind unfamiliar officials. Ada's voice sharpened. They're preparing to denounce the ledger as foreign disinformation. If they win that framing window, everything Elias built becomes noise. The Tycoon's eyes hardened. Then we speak before they do. Marina looked at him steadily. Not you, she said. Me. Silence settled with precise tension. Ada did not object. The Tycoon did not deny. Marina felt the unfamiliar weight of inevitability align with her voice. The press would expect villains, conspirators, monsters. They would not expect a woman who had spent her life learning how to be overlooked. They can dismiss power, she continued. They won't know how to dismiss absence finally speaking. Ada nodded once. Your father knew that too. The decision carried a tremor through the system. Screens recalibrated. Secure uplinks activated. Marina's hands trembled again, but not with fear. It was the tremor of crossing from consequence into agency. She had been leverage, proof, and target. Now she would become vector. The Tycoon stepped closer, lowering his voice. Once you do this, they won't hunt your shadow anymore, he said. They'll hunt your breath. Marina met his gaze without retreat. They've been hunting my breath since I was 9, she said. Now they just get to admit it. Ada's voice softened to near reverence. We have one synchronization window before they override the channels. 90 seconds maximum. Marina closed her eyes once, not in prayer, but in centering. When she opened them, the weight of her father's choices no longer pressed like inheritance. It stood beside her like a completed sentence. Prepare the stream, she said. The screens aligned. and the world outside began to tilt toward hearing her. The countdown pulsed silently at the edge of every screen. 90 seconds compressed into a thin red band that seemed to breathe with the room. Marina stood before the central camera, the glow outlining her face in calm geometry. She felt no urge to rehearse words. What rose in her chest did not need shaping. The Tycoon watched from behind the glass partition, present without being visible. Ada's voice moved quietly through the speakers. Signal integrity at 98%. Once we open, relocation is impossible. Marina nodded once. The idea of escape felt distant now, like a language she no longer spoke. She placed her palm against the cool surface of the table, where the ledger's presence hummed unseen. Her father's choices had led here. Hers would not turn away. The feed opened without ceremony. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the silence fractured into motion, as millions of unseen connections synchronized. Marina's face appeared in 100 simultaneous reflections across the world. Phones, offices, private rooms, control centers. She inhaled slowly. The lens did not intimidate her. It felt smaller than the room she had learned to survive before anyone was watching. "My name is Marina Moreno," she began quietly. Her voice carried without strain. The room behind her vanished, replaced by the infinite anonymity of listening. She did not announce the ledger. She did not accuse. She spoke first of disappearance, how absence shapes a life more aggressively than presence ever could. She spoke of a father who taught her that truth left unattended rots into patterns that look like fate. Ada's system synchronized the supporting data beneath her words in layered streams. Names appeared, corridors of capital linked to human silence. The ledger unfurled not as spectacle but as structure. Viewers did not see blood. They saw logistics. They saw order. And in that order they saw what had been hidden in plain sight for decades. Marina continued without looking down. "I am not an investigator," she said. "I am not an authority. I am a consequence that waited." The rhythm of her voice never wavered as the data deepened in complexity. The first resignations landed in private chambers before the public knew how to react. That information reached Ada as a pulse of shifting signals. She did not interrupt Marina. The truth was moving faster than commentary could corrupt it. In a chamber far from the broadcast, the Tycoon watched numbers collapse that had taken lifetimes to build. He did not celebrate. He observed with a kind of quiet absolution. For the first time in years, his role was not intermediary. He had become a witness. It was a position he had almost forgotten how to occupy. Power had trained him to move. Stillness required something older. Marina's message widened. She did not list crimes. She showed patterns. How markets swallow silence. How governments masquerade apathy as stability. How families inherit danger without knowing the will that named them heirs. The ledger illustrated her words with ruthless elegance. What it revealed was not scandal. It was calculus. The audience did not gasp. They leaned forward. Across multiple jurisdictions, emergency briefings stalled into confusion. Officials who had prepared to denounce foreign disinformation found themselves speaking into voids of evaporated narrative authority. The framing window Ada had warned about closed without their permission. The truth did not argue. It simply unfolded. And with each unfolding, control lost another contour. Marina felt the shift not as triumph, but as release. Her father's name emerged halfway through the exposure, not as a martyr, but as a signature embedded in architecture. She did not pause. Grief no longer demanded interruption. It had completed its work inside her. When she spoke his name aloud, she did it without reverence, only continuity. The ledger was no longer his alone to bear. On the docks, where sirens had once risen in frantic loops, quiet now spread with unnatural speed. Units waited for orders that stalled mid-transmission. Some men removed their earpieces and simply stood beneath the floodlights, watching nothing happen. The absence of a directive became its own kind of command. Everyone sensed the architecture beneath events had shifted without their consent. The feed widened further. Faces appeared of people who had never expected to be recognized as components of invisible machinery. Marina never addressed them directly. She spoke instead to inheritance, how secrets pass more efficiently than language, How children carry the outlines of struggles that were signed before they learned to read. The ledger built the scaffolding for what she already knew in her bones. Ada watched the cascade of confirmations ripple outward. Investigative syndicates synchronized their own releases almost organically, as if a collective breath had been waiting years for permission to exhale. Marina's singular act became a fracture point others had organized their courage around without coordination. The moment was not neat, but it was uncontrollable now, and control had been the only currency that mattered. The Tycoon felt the old architecture finally detach from his spine. The networks he had once navigated as terrain collapsed into unusable noise behind him. He was not spared exposure. Marina had not offered him shelter. His name moved through the ledger's periphery like a shadow traced by indirect light. The absence of his crimes did not equal the absence of his hands. He accepted that without protest. It felt correct. Marina closed the first phase of the broadcast on a sentence that did not sound like conclusion. "This is not confession," she said. "It is continuity." The feed cut to ciphered black. For a long moment no one moved in the room. The after-image of her voice lingered like pressure in glass. Ada's systems recalibrated as global response vectors recalculated around a truth that had entered circulation without permission. The Tycoon stepped forward slowly into the light where Marina stood waiting. He did not speak at once. She looked at him with a steady calm that surprised them both. The rhythm of adrenaline had faded from her body, leaving clarity in its wake. For the first time since the night began, they were not aligned by crisis. They were simply two people standing in the aftermath of consequence. The ledger's case remained sealed on the table between them, now heavier than ever without being touched. "They will not stop," he said finally. "No," Marina answered. "They will reorganize." "And you?" he asked. She considered the weight of that question without haste. "I will remain," she said. "Not visible, not hidden, present." Ada's voice softened through the room. "External responses are fragmenting faster than expected. Several core figures have requested private channels with terms attached." Marina exhaled slowly. "Tell them the era of private channels has expired." Ada complied without comment. The building trembled faintly as helicopters crossed far overhead, searching for a narrative that no longer belonged to them. Marina moved toward the window and looked out at the layered city lights. Nothing looked different, and yet everything had altered its orientation toward tomorrow. She felt no rush of victory, only the quiet friction of inheritance finally redistributed. The Tycoon joined her at the glass. "Your father built an instrument," he said. "You turned it into a voice." Marina shook her head gently. "He built the delay," she said. "I only arrived at the end of it." He studied her profile as the weight of her presence recalibrated what he understood as power. In all his years, no leverage had ever moved so invisibly or so irreversibly. He felt something ease inside him that ambition had kept tense for decades. Not redemption. Resolution. Ada's final update arrived without urgency. "Multiple factions are collapsing negotiations internally." "This was never designed to be survived intact." Marina nodded. "It wasn't meant to be," she said. "It was meant to be interrupted." For the first time that night, silence felt expansive instead of heavy. The ledger remained sealed. Marina did not touch it again. Somewhere far away, people were learning truths that would not fit into their old language. Some would try to translate it into fear, others into policy. Few would understand it as what it was, an inheritance that refused to behave like property. The ease with which she accepted being unclaimed felt like a quiet rebellion against history itself. The Tycoon stepped back. "This is where I disappear," he said. Marina did not argue. She understood the different ways people fade. "Some disappear into shadows," she said. "Some into continuity." He almost smiled at that. He turned and left the room without instruction or ceremony, dissolving into his own architecture of absence. Ada watched him go without comment. Marina stayed by the window, breathing in the unremarkable night that had somehow learned her name. The city did not cheer. It adjusted, and in that subtle recalibration, the world made space for a woman who had never been meant to survive quietly again.